here is an important component of this story that has not been widely reported. Back in November, a lower level federal court judge in Colorado, a state court judge in Colorado. This is where this case first went. It didn't go first to the Supreme Court. It went to a lower level judge in Colorado. And she basically ruled against Trump on every single last issue. That's why this appeal was so hard for him. She had a trial. She ruled that the January 6th report from Liz Cheney and the Democrats was admissible evidence. She credited the credibility of almost every anti-Trump witness while dismissing the credibility of multiple key Trump witnesses. She concluded that he absolutely was guilty of inciting an insurrection. She ruled that he gave a speech on January 6th that fell outside of the protections of Brandenburg because he not only incited an imminent lawless act, but intended to do so. She basically adopted the entire MSNBC, DNC, CNN script of what Trump did on January 6th, one paragraph after the next. She found that he was an insurrectionist. And the only reason she did not remove him from the ballot, she ordered him to appear on the ballot, she rejected the lawsuit. The only reason was because of a legal technicality that she ruled that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment does not apply to the president and vice president. It only applies to every other office in the United States, but not to president and vice president. That is a legal theory that's been around, that if you read the text of the 14th Amendment, it does seem to go out of its way to exclude the president and vice president. It doesn't mention them. It just mentions office holders, and so there's been an argument that it doesn't apply to candidates for president and vice president. And so after spending dozens of pages ruling against Trump on one issue after the next and saying that he incited a violent insurrection on purpose, that he is an insurrectionist, even though he's never been tried with that. The trial she had was not a real trial. It was just an evidentiary hearing, nothing like a criminal case. It was like a 4-day hearing, very quick, none of the protections that you get when you're a criminal defendant. She ruled against him on everything, and that bound the Colorado Supreme Court in a lot of ways in terms of its factual findings. She just at the last minute on the last page, you read this ruling and you think, this is like reading Rachel Maddow's view of January 6th. And then when she got to the end, she said, I rule in favor of these plaintiffs on every issue except this one legalistic point that the 14th Amendment doesn't apply to candidates for president or vice president, therefore the petition is rejected. But it bound the parties with these factual findings that were completely against Trump. And as it turns out, this judge who did that is such a Democratic Party partisan, is so obviously a resistance liberal who supports the narrative that she put into a legal ruling well before she ever got the case, that there were people in Colorado arguing that she should have recused herself because of how blatantly political she is as a Democrat and a liberal. Here is one example from the Colorado Gazette. It said, Trump's judge fails the standard of appearance by George Braukler. Quote, if the judge in the Denver trial of whether Donald Trump is eligible to run for president rules against him, this is before she issued the ruling, there will be plenty of fodder for those looking for reasons to believe the fix was in and there was no fair due process. The judge is Sarah Wallace. She's the one who wrote that first opinion that the Supreme Court just rejected. It ultimately rejected the petition, but like I said, only on a very legalistic ground after finding against Trump. And he said, I believe Judge Sarah Wallace is qualified, intelligent, competent, and unbiased in this matter, and she should have recused herself from hearing this case. The applicable rules make clear that the appearance of partiality is what matters, and not whether it truly exists. These are ethical rules designed to protect the perception of the court as a fair arbiter of justice. That perception is now tarnished. To begin with, several plaintiffs, including some registered Republicans, have sued Democratic Secretary of State Jana Griswold to prevent her from allowing Coloradans to have the option of voting for Donald Trump, the frontrunner for the Republican nomination. Griswold agrees with those suing her. She's a liberal, and she wants to lose this lawsuit. She wants to be banned from putting Trump on the ballot. Characteristic of her consistent and ongoing condemnations of Trump is her unequivocal social media post in September, quote, Donald Trump incited the insurrection and tried to steal the 2020 election from the American people. That's the Secretary of State who's overseeing the Colorado election saying that. That is awkward for Trump. It gets more awkward for Trump, who figuratively sits at Griswold's table in the courtroom. Representing Griswold, in part, is Democratic Attorney General Phil Weiser. He's the Colorado Attorney General. Weiser called for Trump's impeachment as a result of January 6, 2021. So you see these Colorado officials admitting their complete bias against Trump. They hate Trump. They think he should have been impeached for January 6th. They already proclaimed him guilty of insurrection. And the judge in this case, who played such a vital role in finding these facts, Judge Wallace, contributed to the political campaigns of both Griswold and Weiser while waiting to become a judge. She has never contributed, or appears never to have contributed, to a Republican. Less than 2 months after being appointed by Governor Jared Polis, the Democratic governor of Colorado, and again, despite being a judge in waiting, Wallace contributed $100 to the Colorado Turnout Project. The Our Story page of their website, the first page that appears, claims the project was, quote, formed shortly after Colorado Republicans refused to condemn the political extremists who stormed the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021. They announced the project, quote, aims to prevent violent insurrectionists. Finally, the project makes clear its partisan goals, quote, to take the remaining 3 Republican congressional seats in our state. So you have this judge, she donated her own personal money to a group that said, our mission is to make Trump pay for the insurrection, to remove the 3 Republican members of the House representing our state and replace them with Democrats. And she contributed money to the Secretary of State and the Colorado Attorney General, both of whom are Democrats, and both of whom made clear their view that Donald Trump was an insurrectionist. She's the one who decided to sit in judgment of the question of this case that required her to decide, is Trump guilty of insurrection? And needless to say, one paragraph after the next sounded like somebody who just sits in front of the TV watching MSNBC, or who donates money to Democratic and liberal activist groups and Democratic Party candidates. And every finding of fact that she issued, which again, the Supreme Court was bound in its ruling, essentially made clear that she buys the entire resistance narrative about Donald Trump. That was not a biased or impartial judge. It was the exact opposite. And when you have the question of whether you're going to ban a former president from a ballot, and this is the argument I've been making with the indictments of Trump, it is vital to at the very least go out of your way to make sure it seems politically unbiased so you don't contaminate the justice system and seem like you're weaponizing it for political ends. And that's why it was so disturbing that the 4 indictments of Trump came from a liberal Democratic prosecutor in Manhattan, Alvin Bragg, a liberal Democratic Party machine prosecutor in Atlanta, and then 2 federal cases operating under the auspices of the Biden Justice Department, the Justice Department that answers to President Biden, whose primary opponent is Donald Trump. And now this case is even worse. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.